She said we shouldn't be alone, but when I asked why she stayed, the silence between us told me everything she couldn't say out loud. The office was never meant to feel this quiet. By 8 o'clock, the phones had stopped ringing, the hum of the copier was long gone, and the rows of cubicles looked like a maze abandoned midday. I stayed behind, half by duty, half by habit. Paperwork always piled higher than expected, and in the silence, I could finally hear myself think. But that night wasn't like the others. I noticed her presence before she spoke. My boss. She should have been long gone, her car usually one of the first to leave the lot. Yet when I looked up from the stack of reports, she was still there, moving deliberately around her office with the sort of grace that made even the simplest gestures look intentional. She slipped her blazer from her shoulders, folding it across a chair, and for the first time I saw her not just as the woman who carried authority in every meeting, but as a person, 40 years old, sharp, elegant, and undeniably human when the day's weight finally began to show. The overhead lights had dimmed to their evening setting, softening everything into muted gold and shadow. Beyond the wide glass windows, the city glowed, 1,000 stories happening at once, none as strange as the one unfolding between the two of us. I tried not to stare, but my eyes betrayed me. The faint curl of her hair had loosened from its professional knot, brushing against her neck. She leaned over her desk, sorting through folders with a focus that felt practiced, maybe even protective, as though if she kept moving, she wouldn't have to notice I was still there. But she did notice. Our eyes met briefly across the space, just a flicker, but enough. Something in that silence lingered, as if the walls themselves understood we weren't supposed to be sharing this kind of stillness together. My heartbeat quickened, not because of anything said, but because nothing was said at all. I realized I was holding my breath, listening for some sound, her voice, her laugh, even a cough, to break the spell. Instead, the only sound was the faint shuffle of papers and the low hum of the city outside. That's when it struck me, she had chosen to stay. No one forced her, no meeting had held her here, and yet, like me, she lingered in this strange, suspended hour. I didn't know it yet, but that decision, the simple act of not leaving, was the spark that would change everything. She didn't look at me right away when she finally spoke. Her voice drifted across the quiet office, low and steady, but not without weight. We shouldn't be alone here. The words hung in the air longer than they should have, as though the walls themselves paused to listen. I remember the way she stood, leaning slightly against the edge of her desk. Her arms folded over her chest, not with coldness, but as if she needed to keep something in. The city lights behind her traced her outline, painting her figure in silver glow and shadow. For a moment, she didn't look like my boss, she looked like a woman who was suddenly, uncomfortably aware of the space between us. I set my pen down, careful not to move too quickly, not to break whatever fragile thread tied us to this moment. You're right, I wanted to say, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just watched her. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away, restless. She reached for the stack of folders at her side, flipping through them though I could see she wasn't really reading. The tremor in her hands was almost invisible, but I caught it. And in that small shake, I saw something she would never admit outright. The warning she gave me wasn't just about office policy or reputation. It was about the two of us. I wondered what she feared more, the whisper of rumors if someone found us like this, or the dangerous honesty of being alone without the shield of an audience. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, not yet. It had weight, the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, making it hard to breathe. I leaned back in my chair, trying to mask the storm inside me, while she turned away just slightly, as if needing to guard herself from what my eyes might reveal. I had seen her command entire rooms with a calm authority, her tone sharp enough to end arguments before they began. But here, in this dimly lit office, she wasn't commanding anyone. She was cautious. Hesitant. Vulnerable, even. And in that hesitation, I felt my heart shift. Her warning should have pushed me back, reminded me of the lines I wasn't meant to cross. Instead, it only deepened the pull, because now I understood, she wasn't warning me about the rules. She was warning herself about the feelings she didn't want to admit were rising to the surface. The truth was, I didn't want to leave. And deep down, I suspected neither did she. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was the way her voice faltered when she told me we shouldn't be alone, or maybe it was the quiet defiance that stirred in me every time she tried to build walls between us. But instead of stepping away, instead of nodding like the obedient employee she expected me to be, I found myself standing. The chair scraped softly against the carpet as I rose, and her eyes lifted to mine, startled. I didn't close the distance, not fully. I left space between us, enough to show respect, but close enough for her to feel the shift. And then I said it. Then why did you stay? The question left my lips quieter than I intended, but sharp enough to cut through the stillness. Her breath caught. I heard it. She froze as if the simple line had tethered her in place. For a heartbeat, I thought she might laugh it off, wave her hand, dismiss it as nonsense. That would have been easier, for both of us. But she didn't. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her eyes, usually so steady, so certain, flickered with something I couldn't name. Surprise. Guilt. Longing. Maybe all three. She straightened, as though gathering every ounce of composure she had left, but her mask had slipped. I could see it now, the human beneath the title. I didn't press her. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. The air between us seemed alive, charged with something neither of us had expected when the day began. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to stay steady. I wasn't trying to challenge her, not really. I just wanted her to know I saw her. Not as a boss, not as the woman everyone admired from a safe distance, but as someone who chose to remain in this office, in this moment, when she had every reason to walk away. She turned slightly, her gaze dropping to the folders on her desk. I saw her fingers brush the edge of the papers, clinging to them as though they could shield her from my words. But she didn't move to leave. And that was all the answer I needed. Her silence wasn't rejection. It was confession. Whatever boundary she had tried to draw, she had already crossed it the moment she stayed. And now, so had I. She didn't answer my question. Not with words, anyway. Instead, she sat down heavily in the leather chair behind her desk, the kind of motion that betrayed a fatigue she never allowed anyone else to see. For a moment, her eyes drifted shut, and I saw her hand lift to her temple, pressing softly as though the week had finally caught up with her all at once. I had seen her command boardrooms with flawless poise, navigating questions and deadlines with a steady confidence that made everyone lean on her. But this was different. Here was the woman behind the authority, stripped of her armor by exhaustion. And I couldn't look away. Quietly, I stepped toward the small table near the wall where the office coffee machine sat. I didn't ask if she wanted any, I simply poured a fresh cup, the faint hiss of the machine filling the silence between us. When I walked back and placed it gently on her desk, her eyes lifted in surprise. Her hand reached for the paper cup, brushing mine in the exchange. It was the lightest touch, but it lingered, her fingers cool against my skin, mine warm against hers. Neither of us moved too quickly to pull away. And in that fleeting contact, something passed between us, recognition, gratitude, and a vulnerability she hadn't intended to share. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice quieter now, softer. She took a sip, and I watched her shoulders lower just slightly, the tension easing as the warmth spread through her. I sat back down, not directly across from her but close enough to show I wasn't retreating. She let out a small breath and gave a half-smile, almost self-conscious. "It's been a long week," she admitted, eyes flicking away as though embarrassed by the confession. Her words weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. She had spent years building an image of strength, of control. For her to say something so simple, so human, felt like a kind of intimacy I hadn't expected. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fill the silence with clumsy reassurance. I just let the moment exist, the two of us sitting in that soft light, bound by the truth she had let slip. And maybe she realized it too, because for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look like my boss at all. She looked like a woman who wanted, just for a moment, to be seen and understood. The office felt smaller somehow, like the walls had drawn in closer around us. Maybe it was the hour, or maybe it was the fact that she'd finally let a little of herself slip through. Whatever it was, I couldn't stop noticing the details, the curve of her shoulders now softened without the weight of her blazer, the way her hair had loosened and framed her face, and the faint tiredness in her eyes that no one else at work would ever see. She leaned back in her chair, coffee in hand, and gave me a look that was less like a boss and more like a woman trying to decide how much of herself she could reveal. "You know," she said, her voice low, "people think I thrive on this pace. But most nights, I walk into an empty apartment." The honesty of it startled me. It wasn't the kind of thing a supervisor should tell an employee. And yet, here we were. I nodded, keeping my voice careful. "I know what you mean. I spend more time here than I do anywhere else. Some days, I forget what home is supposed to feel like." Her lips curved into a smile, not wide, but real. A sound followed, soft and unexpected, her laugh. It was small at first, almost cautious, but it grew, like she had surprised herself. I'd never heard her laugh like that before. Not in a meeting, not in the halls, not anywhere. And once I heard it, I wanted to hear it again. She covered her mouth briefly, as if embarrassed. "I shouldn't be saying all this. It's unprofessional." But she didn't stop talking. Piece by piece, she shared fragments, little glimpses of the person beneath the role. Stories about late nights spent with nothing but wine and silence. Memories of books she hadn't had time to finish. The way she missed painting, something she hadn't done in years. And I listened. Not as her employee. Not as someone looking for leverage or favor. I listened because I wanted to. Because the more she revealed, the more human she became. And the more human she became, the more I realized how much I wanted to be the one who reminded her she didn't have to carry everything alone. The papers scattered on her desk no longer mattered. The ticking of the clock didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the soft lilt of her voice, the honesty threading through it, and the feeling that every second we spent together was carrying us closer to something neither of us dared to name. The clock on the wall ticked past 9. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet where even the hum of the air conditioning felt loud. We should have left by now, both of us. And yet neither of us moved. She gathered her coat slowly, draping it over her arm, her movements deliberate, as though preparing herself for the end of whatever this was. Her eyes flicked to the window, then to me, then back to the floor, never lingering too long in one place. "I should get going," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. I stood as well, tucking my chair back in place. That's when it happened. A pen rolled off the edge of her desk, clattering onto the carpet between us. We both bent down at the same time. Our faces met in the middle. Close enough for me to feel the warmth of her breath. Close enough to notice the way her perfume lingered faintly in the air, soft, elegant, undeniably her. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of us moved. My hand hovered over the pen, but I wasn't reaching for it anymore. I was looking at her, at the way her lashes lowered slightly, at the small hitch in her breathing, at the flicker of something in her eyes that was far more dangerous than words. If I leaned just an inch closer, if she tilted her head just slightly, everything would change. The silence was deafening. My pulse thudded in my ears, and I couldn't tell if it was mine or hers. Then she smiled, small, nervous, almost apologetic. Her fingers closed around the pen just before mine did, brushing against my skin in a deliberate, fleeting touch. She stood first, straightening her coat against her shoulders, as though reminding herself of who she was supposed to be. "Clumsy of me," she murmured, but her voice betrayed her. It wasn't clumsiness. It was a moment neither of us had expected, and neither of us was willing to acknowledge aloud. I rose slowly, meeting her gaze. This time, she didn't look away. The line hadn't been crossed, not yet. But we had both seen what would happen if it ever was. And that knowledge hung between us like a live wire, buzzing quietly, waiting for the day one of us was brave enough to touch it. We walked out together, side by side, the empty office humming behind us as the lights flickered into night mode. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the hallway, soft and steady, like we were both careful not to disturb the fragile quiet that had settled between us. When we reached the elevator, she pressed the button with a deliberate calm, though her hand lingered on the wall just a moment too long, as if to steady herself. I stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was light, accidental on the surface, but neither of us shifted away. The doors slid open with a muted chime. She stepped inside first, her coat folded neatly in her arms, her expression composed again, or trying to be. I followed, the silence stretching, filled only with the faint hum of the elevator. Halfway down, she spoke. Not as my boss. Not as the woman who carried the weight of a company on her shoulders. But simply as herself. Thank you, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I turned toward her. For what? Her eyes met mine, steady now, no longer darting away. For staying. For not making me feel like I had to keep pretending tonight. The sincerity in her words sank deep. It wasn't a declaration, not a confession, but it didn't need to be. It was more than that. It was trust. The elevator reached the lobby, doors sliding open with a quiet sigh. Neither of us moved at first. We just stood there, suspended in that strange, delicate moment where the world outside didn't matter. Finally, she stepped out, her heels tapping lightly against the polished floor. I followed, close enough to hear the soft rhythm of her breathing. As we reached the glass doors leading to the street, she hesitated again, her hand brushing mine as she pushed them open. It wasn't a grab, not even a hold, just the lightest touch of skin against skin, a reminder that we had been here together. That she had chosen not to leave, and I had chosen not to let the silence break us apart. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual life, cars sweeping past, neon signs flickering. But for me, everything had slowed. We didn't say anything more as we walked toward the lot. We didn't have to. The promise was already there, woven into the spaces between our words, our glances, our quiet touches. It wasn't the end. It wasn't even the beginning. It was something far rarer, the steady, patient unfolding of something we both knew would matter.